students, Mrs. Girot here, and I just am making a summary of our class on Thursday because I had some technical issues, and I know if you start watching that recording, you're going to be like, what's going on? Because there's no sound. So the first thing that we had on the board this Thursday was my on time and engaged slide. So this is your warm-up. This is your bell ringer. This is when you come to class, you have something to do immediately when you get there to show me that you're there and you're engaged. So today's on time and engaged was, how do you feel about critiques? What are the pros and cons? And so this is a cue for students then to take their whiteboard text tools and to just write about it on the board. If you want to draw about it, write about it, picture about it, meme about it, whatever you want to do, but show me that you're engaged. So how do you feel about critiques? And what are the pros and cons? A lot of the students had said that the pros are that you get to learn from other students how they view it, and sometimes they'll share their expertise and show ways that you could improve it, which is awesome. And then one of the cons that a student expressed is that sometimes people can say things that aren't nice, and that's very true. It's kind of scary to put yourself out there, but it's worth it. One of the things that I was telling you, my motif for this block is everyone you will ever meet knows something you don't. And I have learned that teaching this 3D class. More than any other class that I've ever taught. It has been so incredible to see the things that students can do with their creativity when it comes to Blender, things that I would never think to do. And I'm always so inspired, and I hope that other students feel that way about each other when they see each other's work. And that's part of the reason why I have you posting your work in the discussions, because I want you to be inspired by one another. And I want you to have that opportunity to critique each other and to ask each other questions and to give each other feedback. So say this with me out loud. I am here to participate. I am here to learn and use the time provided in class to complete my assignments. I am here to ask questions. I will raise my hand when I need help. I am needed. My contributions are valued and enrich the learning of my peers and my teacher. So when we are critiquing each other, always remember the compliment sandwich. The compliment sandwich comes in handy when you're critiquing or when you're asking your parents a favor, anytime that you have to write an email to a teacher. It's always great to think about the compliment sandwich with something nice I can say first, then let's get to the nitty-gritty of it, and let's end on a positive note. I wanted to know if you know the difference between subjective and objective, and I was actually really surprised in class that we had a student that said subjective is your opinion, and a student who said objective is factual, and that was absolutely right. I was explaining to students where the term subjective comes from. Subject. So you have a subject and you have an object. The subject is the person. The object is the thing, okay? So if a subject, the person, is having feelings, like if somebody's sick, things that are subjective are things that only the subject, only the person who's sick knows about their illness. Only they know if their stomach hurts. Only they know if their heart is beating 1,000,000 miles an hour. We can't look at that person and see those things. You can't look at that person and see that maybe they're feeling really hot, or maybe they're feeling really cold or nauseous. So things that are subjective are things that are specific only to that person. And those are your opinions. Those are your value judgments. That's when you start saying things like, oh, that's really pretty, while somebody else in the room is saying, oh, that's so ugly. Those are value judgments. And when you are critiquing, you want to stay away from value judgments. Yes, of course, you're going to have your opinions, your initial knee-jerk, gut, visceral reactions. But you want to just kind of hone in and keep those thoughts to yourself and focus on the object itself. So objective things are things that we can see, hear, taste, smell, touch. These are things that we can measure or analyze with our senses, okay? So it's not just stuff that's known to the subject, okay? It's things that we can all observe. So when you're thinking about what somebody's artwork that they've submitted, you want to base that on the completion of the objectives. So for each of these assignments, you'll notice there's a rubric, and it tells you what you need to do and how you need to earn your points. So be thinking about that. Did the student complete those? And you can be very specific and say the student has done A, B, and C. And then I love it when they surprise us all by doing D on top of it. So it's when you can complete those objectives and then do something special that makes it unique. That's really awesome. And a way to do your critique also is to make sure that you're filling that compliment sandwich with some substance, okay? So make it substantive. And the elements of art and the principles of designs are great ways for you to put that substance into words. I don't know if you remember the elements of art from other art classes that I've taught or other art classes that you've taken, but the elements of art are line, shape, color. I'm guessing that's space. Nope, that one's value. Value, form, texture, and there's space, okay? So you want to talk specifically about how the work of art incorporates those elements, which are the building blocks of any visual design. And these principles of design, and these are just some examples of way that they're used. These principles of design are the techniques that artists use to make an interesting visual composition using these elements. And those principles are things like balance, contrast, emphasis, movement, pattern, rhythm, unity, variety, proportion, scale, and harmony. There is nothing on this slide right now because you were supposed to come up with those on the whiteboard today. And you know, you can always Google. You can look up elements of art and find a gazillion different videos and websites that talk about the elements and principles of design. So the next thing that we did in class is watch a video. And the objective of watching this video was to come out of it being able to recall all the details that you can from the video and to be prepared to share about what you remembered. So we're going to watch the art assignment, How to Critique. And your goal is to be able to remember and to recall. To recall means that I can actually put it into words and explain it to another person. And it's a very important skill to have. How often do you watch something and then when it's over, if somebody asks you any questions about it, you can't remember how to put it into words? So this challenges you to pay extra attention while you're watching it and try to get that into your memory bank, into that place where you can actually retrieve it and talk about it.
This week, I want to talk to you about something that's been weighing on my mind lately, and that's the issue of critique. If you spend any time on the internet, it's something you come across frequently. If you're the victim of internet trolls, or if you are an internet troll, listen up. There is an etiquette to critique that has been in play for a long time in art schools all over the world. Let's see if we can learn something from that world and apply it in ours. So here's how an art critique usually goes. An art student sets up their work to show their teacher, a group of teachers, their friends, their class, or an even bigger group. Then discussion ensues, questions are asked, and criticism is offered. Sometimes things do go awry, tears are shed, and expletives hurled. But it's usually a civilized affair, and there is an etiquette to these things that I think it would be useful for us to discuss in relation to the art assignment and to the internet community at large. But first, let's talk about why we should critique in the first place. Because it's the internet and you can anonymously say whatever you want? I'd say no. Because you'd like to change the minds of the person you're critiquing? Definitely no. Critique is often most instructive for the person offering it. In looking at other people's work and formulating your opinion of it, you're learning a great deal. I don't often see people responding to internet comments by saying, "Gee, thanks, I never thought about it that way. I agree with you now." But that's okay, because it's still a constructive process. It can help shape your beliefs and teach you about different ways of looking and thinking. That being said, here are some critiquing guidelines. 1. Be attentive. The internet has trained us to look at something for a millisecond and to scan text quickly. Fight that urge. Let something linger on the screen for seconds or even minutes. Look at it once and then look at it another time later in the day or the next week. I often have instinctual reactions when I first see something, but then my opinion changes the longer I spend with it, or even a week later when I'm remembering it. Use your faculties and your patience and trust your reactions. 2. Don't be lazy. I am a terrible example to follow. When I look at all of the responses that come into the art assignment, my head fills with ideas, but then I get a phone call or I'm in a hurry and I just reblog something or say something tepid instead of saying something substantive about it. I also lean way too heavily on the word interesting. It's value neutral, which is helpful, but it also says very little. For example, the history of documentary photography is interesting, but The Simpsons is also interesting. It's not a particularly specific adjective. There are lots of lazy words, and it's okay to use them sometimes, but try to follow them up with something that has teeth. Instead of saying, "This is great," say, "This is great because you've done A, B, and C, and then surprised us all by adding D." 3. Be generous. Try to look at each work of art for what is successful. Performance artist Matthew Goolish tells us in an essay on criticism to look for the aspects of wonder. We want to encourage more wonder in the world, right? So when we come across it, let's celebrate it. Criticism can be an incredible act of empathy. What made someone make that thing? Why did they do it that way? Be sympathetic to the maker and realize that the mere act of putting yourself and your work out there takes courage. 4. Find your point of entry. You don't have to have a PhD in art history to talk about art. So find your point of connection to a piece, as personal as you'd like it to be. For example, this reminds me of a bath mat, in the best possible way, because its tactility is enticing and it transports me instantly to my friend's bathroom circa 1997, which had floral wallpaper and smelled like Garnier Fructis shampoo. As it happens, it is a bath mat and not an artwork, but it could be an artwork. Think about what the thing in question reminds you of, whether it's from the same discipline, something personal, or something far-flung. Think about the decisions that were made along the way. Maybe it's the materials used or not used. Maybe it's the way it's been arranged in space or documented for us to see. Maybe it's what the maker decided to include or exclude from the frame of the work. What are the skills on display? Maybe the artist is not an amazing draftsperson, but still ended up with a delightfully peculiar, delicately rendered drawing that communicates much more than a perfectly photorealistic drawing might have done. Maybe the ideas behind a project outweigh the execution. Maybe the execution outweighs the ideas. And if you can't think of anything declarative to say, ask a question. Don't be a jerk. There is a lot you can say about something without declaring it to be good or bad. It can be a productive challenge to try to not make any value judgments while talking about a work. Most art critiques take place in a room where all of the individuals have to look at each other's faces and deal with the immediate consequences of saying something provocative. Pretend you're in the same room with the person you're critiquing. Pretend they're someone you know. I'm not saying to lie or blow smoke. I'm saying don't be a jerk. And finally, why make yourself available for critique? Faced with the reality of all the internet trolls in the world, it's completely understandable to stay in your hole and not participate in internet communities. I totally get that. But the positives of participating in this and other online projects can be real and rewarding. It's hard to have perspective on your work. And offering it up for review means you might have the chance to see it with fresh eyes and learn from the experience of others. But it also makes you vulnerable, which can be a miserably crappy feeling, but sometimes a liberating and empowering one. If you can try to take your ego out of it, you can learn a great deal. I want you guys to talk about each other's work. I don't want this to be just me passing judgment on you guys and the amazing work you do. We must be in this together. So talk to each other, comment on works. Don't be mean, but think about what the aspects of wonder might be in each work and share that with each other. It will make the experience of the art assignment better for everyone involved.
Excellent. Now that you have watched that video with your full attention, it's time for the recall race. You will write every detail you can recall from the video. Go ahead and take a pen and paper and recall all the details you can about this video now. Okay, are you back? Some of the ideas that I remembered are when she said that when you're looking at an image, do the ideas outweigh the execution, or does the execution outweigh the ideas? I loved that idea. Don't be a jerk. Put yourself out there. Be specific. This is great because you've done A, B, and C, and then surprise us all by adding D. Be generous. Look for what's successful, the aspects of wonder. We want to encourage more wonder in the world. So when we see it, let's celebrate it. Those were some of the key points that I took from that. I would have loved to have seen yours, and that's why I want you to come to class and I want you to engage with me, please. We did a fun little team sport, and this was probably one of the best activities that we had. Together, everyone achieves more. So we divided the class up into 2 teams, and each team had 1 minute to list as many value, neutral, or lazy words as they could. And it was really awesome. The students actually had a tie. They each came up with about 7. And a lot of the terms were things like nice and good and, you know, those basic value neutral words. All right. Yeah. It's pretty. It's meh. Things like that. Remember, if you're trying to stay away from those types of words, that's where you focus on the elements and principles, okay? So if you're thinking about line, shape, color, form, contrast, emphasis, those types of things, you're going to easily find yourself having a lot to say about any artwork. So here's a little quiz that we took. How would you describe this critique? I like it. It's colorful. There are people looking at the water. Is that critique tepid? And tepid means lukewarm. So like if you dip your hand into some water and it's lukewarm, it's tepid. Or if you have some hot chocolate and it's not hot anymore, it's tepid. It also metaphorically means a lack of enthusiasm. And the other option would be, do you think that this critique is substantive? Does it have a lot of substance? Is it meaningful? Did it dig into those elements of art and principles of design and really rip this apart and analyze it and interpret it? No, it didn't. This was a very tepid critique. Let's look at the next one. My first impression of the artwork is that the face of the woman is not proportionate and is only painted with lines, no curves. The main colors that are used in this painting are green, yellow, blue, purple, red, and black. The mood and visual effect that this painting portrays can be considered to be suffering and sadness. So, would you consider this critique to be tepid or substantive? Does it go into details and talk about some of those elements of art and principles of design? Does it give a possible interpretation about the meaning that's conveyed by the artist? Yes, it does. This is actually quite substantive. Definitely not a tepid critique. So the next thing that we did in class is we took a look at your week 1 assignments, the Vase Assignment. And sometimes when I'm giving an assignment, I think, oh boy, I wonder if this is a little too boring. But I'm telling, when you guys add that little sprinkle of your personal magic, it's never boring. It's never boring for any of us. And I know that sometimes it's, it's hard to put your work out in front of people. I get it. But I think that everybody in this class is going through that same feeling. So try not to feel like you're the only one. I really like you guys to be more confident in sharing your work because you are phenomenal. So we went through and students were supposed to put together a quick little critique. For this one, you did A, B, and C, and then you surprised us when you did D. What would you say? Or how would you find your connection with this piece? Do you make a personal connection to it? So for me, if I had to say you did A, B, and C, I'd say, wow, you created a stunning table for this. It's so surprising. It defies gravity. And it's just very visually interesting. It draws the eye right up to the subject, which is the vase. The color of the vase and the texture of the vase, that terracotta, gives it kind of a realistic feeling. And I love the shimmer and reflection that's coming off of it. I liked the texture of the spirals going around the terracotta vase. It reminds me of something that I've made in an art class in high school. And then the background color is a great contrast against the terracotta. I love the fact that the entire space is full. Every single thing in the composition creates harmony, and it's unified and balanced. And we could go on and on. Some of the things that I notice about this one, first off, is the Zig Zag Texture. And I'm in my head thinking, how did this student create a zigzag on this vase? And I want to know, and I want this student to be in class and to step forward and be able to explain it and share it to the rest of us, how they came up with this texture, because it's stunning. So please come to class. And this composition is very interesting. I like the use of these bright, vivid colors contrasted with the terracotta vase. The shape of the vase is lovely. I want this vase on my table right now. I want to fill it with flowers, and that would actually be a really fun follow-up. And maybe I'll do this next year when I teach this class. If students are making a vase, next year I'll have them fill it with something. I would really like to see what this artist had in mind to put in this vase. Now, aren't these exquisite? I feel like I'm in a different country or a different time period. These are stunning, just beautiful. They look so realistic, the way that they're transparent and we can see the texture in the background. I love the way that this student used so many different textures. The dim lighting, it just adds so much to the ambiance and the atmosphere. This is an incredible composition, and I think all of us would like to actually be standing in this room right now looking at these vases. And then we have our whimsical vase. This is obviously our student who has an incredible sense of humor. We want this student in our class. We want to pick this student's brain and be able to engage and have fun with this student. So please come to class. The one thing that this student looks like they might not know how to do right now is use the smoothing tool, and that is on the left hand side of Blender. So if I have any type of mesh object or a vase that I've made with a curve, and I'm seeing any of this geometry, all I need to do is come over here to my tool shelf on the left. As long as it's selected, click smooth, and you'll notice that it is nice and smooth. The thing to remember about smoothing things out is that it does create a lot more geometry. So the more of these types of objects that you have in your composition that are smooth, that are not showing that geometry, the more RAM it's going to take up on your computer, and it can end up crashing Blender, or you might not be able to get your scene to animate. So that's something to keep in mind. That's a good reason to keep your things flat versus smooth while you are in the process of creating everything, just so that things don't crash on you. But when you're trying to get that beautiful screenshot, then by all means smooth it out. Next, we had a lovely composition that was similar to one that we've seen before, where it's transparent, actually looks like glass. The bright magenta color that is used for the background, you can see that through it. It enhances the colors. There's a little bit of reflection. The shadow underneath is nice. And then once again, of course, I'm thinking, wow, I wish I could see something in this. What would you set in this vase? What would you put in it? And that would be so cool to see. And then this student also put the vase in a different environment. And I have just been talking about the fact that it kind of looks like it's hovering right now. And if you are wanting to make two images come together and look like one and feel like that other image is actually grounded, you've got to add shadow. Doing in week 2, and week 2 does start on Thursdays. So we have live class every Thursday at 2 p.m. and that starts a fresh new week for us, okay? So your assignments are due on Wednesdays. So we have started week 2 now. I want you to complete section 6 in our Blender for Beginners course that we started in week 1. So if you have not completed week 1, please go back to week 1 and make sure that you get that done first. In this section, we are going to learn the Cycles rendering engine, Cycles shader, and the node editor, the powerful shader system, texturing, UV mapping, and then there's an exercise on leaf texturing. So what you're actually going to be doing, and the Common Core State Standards, there's actually several strands that are covered in this from our 3D graphics. One of those strands is students will be able to create and apply textures and materials. And so we're going to focus on that for the most part. Understand shaders, including diffuse shader, specular shader, procedural texture, other software specific shaders. You're going to learn a lot of shaders. Adjusting your material attributes. I know that you have taken 3D modeling, and I know that you know how to adjust the color. There's also ambient color, diffuse, transparency, opacity, specularity, reflectivity, luminosity, bump, normal, displacement. So you'll be able to see what these strands are and how to apply them after you finish this lesson this week. And the objective, what you need to come away with, is to create a scene that, and it should say that, exhibits your skill and prowess with shaders and textures. And I want you to have fun and be creative. Give us that personal magic that you have, that element of surprise that you're going to bring, that je ne sais quoi. And use some of these shaders. So according to the rubric that's in the discussion, you'll see I want you to use at least 4 different textures and shaders, and I want your scene to tell a story. So be thinking about what story you want to tell and how those textures and shaders are going to contribute to the overall meaning of the story of your scene. We would have used the rest of the time in class to get started. You have until next Wednesday to complete this, and you're going to submit your shader scene to the week 2 discussion forum. And that concludes our week 2 live class summary. Thanks so much for tuning in and paying attention. I can't wait to see you next Thursday. And I look forward to seeing your submissions for week 1 if you don't have your vase in, and for week 2. Have a great weekend.